The story of Marvin Heemeyer had the effect of an exploding bomb in the United States. A simple worker, an Army veteran from Colorado, literally blew half the city to smithereens. He did it with the help of an armored bulldozer, which he designed himself for several years. 13 destroyed buildings. This was the revenge of a little man on the system for breaking and reshaping his little life. June 4, 2004 became the day of Marvin Heemeyer's triumph and at the same time the day of his death. And 20 years later, Heemeyer's act echoes in modern culture, gathering fans and haters around him. For most of his life, Marvin Heemeyer was a law-abiding American. He served in the U.S. Army and was a Vietnam War veteran. After returning home and completing his military service, he moved to the small town of Granby. There, in 1992, he purchased a small plot of land from the Dochev family of businessmen for $42,000. At first he intended to rent the land to a friend, but then he opened a car repair shop there to repair mufflers. Heemeyer was good with his hands and was a good engineer. He assembled snowmobiles himself, on which he took newlyweds for rides in winter. He was never married. After an unhappy love experienced in his early youth, he lived as a bachelor. Except for this circumstance, there was nothing strange about Heemeyer. He did not behave aggressively, maintained good relations with friends and clients, had an active civic position. What happened next can be called a real drama of a small man, but talented and desperate, clashing with the system. In 1997, it was decided to expand the cement plant in Granby. The initiative belonged to the Dochev family, who already owned some land in the city. They began buying up the land adjacent to the future plant. This was done so that there would be no other small businesses, hotels or eateries near the plant. Among them was the Heemeyer plot with his workshop. It is impossible to say exactly how the events unfolded, but Dochev claims that they initially agreed with the owner for $250,000. Then he allegedly re-evaluated the site and raised the price to $375,000, and then asked for $1 million. These negotiations took place long before the land redistribution proposal was presented to the city administration. This raises the question, was Heemeyer really going to sell the land or was he just teasing Dochev? Or was he stalling for time? In 2001, the commission approved the plant's construction plan. Heemeyer unsuccessfully appealed the decision. For several years, he led a campaign to oppose the construction. Some city residents supported him, fearing noise and environmental risks. However, the Dochev family skillfully worked with both the public and the city administration, providing reports, plans, and models that were supposed to convince everyone that the expansion of production was legal and safe. Ultimately, Heemeyer lost all the cases and an appeal he filed, claiming that the construction of the plant and the purchase of land around Dochev had blocked his access to his auto repair shop. The court found that was not the case. In addition, the authorities fined Heemeyer $2,500 for various violations, including having a junk car on the property and not having a sewer connection. The sewer problem had been going on for years. Heemeyer refused to fix it and used a concrete tank on his property. When it filled up, Marvin pumped its contents into a nearby ditch and then tried to illegally connect to the sewer system on the neighboring property. After the last lawsuit against the city was dismissed in April 2002, Heemeyer blamed his lawyer for the failure and even demanded reimbursement of his expenses. Knowing that the decision on the plant was final, he went to California and bought a Komatsu bulldozer at auction for $16,000. He needed the bulldozer to build a new driveway to his shop, but the authorities wouldn't let him. He moved it to Granby and put up a "for sale" sign, but the fatal bulldozer attracted no buyers. In October, Heemeyer announced he was closing his business and putting his entire property up for sale. The property was sold for $400,000, almost 10 times the price Heemeyer had paid for it, to the trash company, a waste management company. The new owners of the property completed the water and sewer connections Heemeyer had been waiting 9 years to install the day after the sale. Heemeyer subsequently leased half of the building he had previously owned to finish some work. He built a wall to separate it from the rest of the building, changed the locks, and spent his time there, working on his bulldozer. He lived there, never returning home, and dumping his sewage into the same ditch he had previously used to illegally dump his sewage. For nearly 2 years, Heemeyer, a talented engineer with military experience, turned the bulldozer into a killing machine. Investigators later found his diaries, which included this sentence, "I wonder how I haven't been caught yet. The project took up part of my time for more than a year and a half." He was surprised that people who came to see him saw a crane weighing about a ton, but for some reason their vision was blurred. No one had any idea what these machines were for. Heemeyer lined the bulldozer with 12mm steel sheets, covered with a centimeter-thick layer of cement. He equipped the machine with cameras protected by a bulletproof layer of plastic and equipped with a cleaning system, with the images being output to monitors. Inside the cabin, he installed a refrigerator with a small supply of food, water and beer. On June 4, 2004, 52-year-old Marvin Heemeyer began his judgment day. He armed himself with a rifle, a carbine, and a revolver, took a gas mask with him, and climbed into the cab. Using a remote-controlled crane, he lowered additional armor onto the car and welded the door shut, barricading himself inside. At 2:30 p.m., the bulldozer entered the streets of Granby. Heemeyer acted according to plan. His destructive route included the homes and offices of everyone he had fought for almost 7 years. He destroyed several factory buildings, including office space. Heemeyer then moved on to the homes of city council members and the bank building that had threatened to take his home away from him. He damaged the administration building, the office of the local newspaper, and the home of the widow of a judge who had ruled against him. The police fired at the bulldozer with revolvers and shotguns, but the armor protected the machine well. The special forces were also unsuccessful. Heemeyer continued moving even after 200 hits. His gas mask protected him from tear gas. He also fired back at the police through the loopholes. The bulldozer stopped only when it started to destroy the supermarket. Presumably, the car was buried under heavy debris, but some sources claim that one of the shots damaged the radiator. For 2 hours after the stop, law enforcement officers did not dare to approach the bulldozer. It was opened with heavy equipment only a day later. Inside lay the lifeless body of Heemeyer with a bullet in his temple. The captain went to the bottom together with his armored ship. Heemeyer destroyed 13 buildings in the city, causing damages exceeding $7 million. Despite the scale of the destruction, no one except Heemeyer was hurt. Many residents of the city were notified of what was happening and were able to evacuate early. 11 of the 13 buildings were unoccupied. According to local authorities, Heemeyer fired 15 shots at transformers and propane tanks. They claimed that if the tanks had exploded, it would have posed a threat to people half a mile away. However, residents and game wardens believe that Heemeyer fired into the air to scare off police. The concrete plant Heemeyer had fought was back in business 3 days later, producing concrete. The Liberty Savings Branch reopened. Many Granby residents and ordinary Americans saw Heemeyer as a fighter, an implacable, principled man who dared to challenge the system. A line from his diary can still be found on T-shirts and posters sold on Amazon. Heemeyer's defenders argue that he is an icon, not a crazed terrorist, because his vengeance did not result in innocent people being harmed. Critics insist that the lack of casualties was a stroke of luck, because he had no way of knowing whether there were people in the government buildings and plant offices. The incident was the subject of a documentary film, Tread, and a book, Killdozer, the true story of the Colorado bulldozer riot.
When this is all over, if it ever is, which I doubt, I hope it will prove to people that much of the meddling in your neighbor's affairs is destructive. It will come back to haunt you. And it can come back to haunt you in spades. And the only person you'll have to blame is yourself, Marvin Heemeyer.